The air in Boston is heavy with questions that no one dares to answer yet. What if the next chapter of Celtics history is not written by waiting for Jayson Tatum to heal, but by pulling the trigger on one of the most daring moves in recent NBA memory? Imagine a scenario where the green and white don't just survive the so-called gap year, but weaponize into a launch pad for a new dynasty. That vision has a name, and it echoes across the league louder than most want to admit: Pascal Siakam. Before we dive into what this could mean for Boston Celtics, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the hype bell so you never miss a single update. Every second counts because what we are about to uncover could redefine the entire trajectory of the franchise. The Celtics are entering the 2025-2026 season with uncertainty hanging over every headline. Jayson Tatum, the cornerstone, the superstar, the soul of the team, will not set foot on the court this year. For many franchises, that would mean a lost season. For Boston, it could be something else entirely. The front office has already shown that it is unafraid to make bold moves. Trading Drew Holiday for Anthony Simons and sending Kristaps Porzingis to Atlanta were not minor adjustments, they were seismic shifts. Each move carefully calculated, not only to manage the brutal second apron tax, but also to reset the foundation in a way that leaves room for an unexpected power play. This is where Pascal Siakam enters the story. A $188 million superstar with championship DNA, a player whose presence transforms a frontcourt from shaky to elite in a single move. Think about what Boston lost with Porzingis gone: size, versatility, rim protection, and a secondary scoring option. Now think about what Siakam offers: the ability to dominate from the low post, to hit mid-range shots under pressure, to create for others when defenses collapse, and to guard across multiple positions with the kind of agility that perfectly matches Boston's defensive identity. Pair him with Jaylen Brown and Derek White now, and you have a team that can remain relevant without Tatum. Pair him with Tatum when he returns, and suddenly you are staring at one of the most devastating trios in modern basketball. But here is the question that makes this rumor impossible to ignore. Could Boston really pry him away from Indiana? The Pacers just reached the NBA Finals, falling in a heartbreaking 7-game series. They are waiting for Tyrese Haliburton to recover from an Achilles injury. Everything says they should keep their roster intact and run it back when he returns. Yet history tells us the NBA never waits for perfect timing. Window of opportunity is a phrase that haunts every front office. And if Boston comes knocking with Anthony Simons, multiple young assets, and a mountain of draft picks stretching into the future, would Indiana at least have to listen? This is the mystery that keeps fans awake at night. For Boston, the gamble would be enormous. Emptying draft capital, sacrificing depth, and reshaping a rotation around an incoming star. But what is the alternative? To wait patiently for Tatum while the rest of the league strengthens, while rivals sharpen their weapons, and while the Celtics risk losing the edge of momentum that defines champions. The question is not only about Siakam, it is about whether Boston wants to survive this season or wants to attack it head-on. There is also the psychological element. Boston is not a franchise that accepts mediocrity. Every era of Celtics history is defined by ambition, by taking chances that others thought reckless, by chasing banners rather than protecting comfort. Trading for Pascal Siakam would be more than a roster move, it would be a statement of intent. A declaration that the Celtics refuse to sit idle, even in a season when excuses are easy to find. Skeptics will say the Pacers will never let go of a player who just helped deliver a finals berth. That is logical. But logic in the NBA often collapses under pressure from the right offer. Players leave when no one expects it. Deals happen when all signs say impossible. And this is why the curiosity surrounding Siakam to Boston refuses to fade. Imagine the playoff picture of 2026. Tatum returning to full strength, Brown in his prime, and Siakam anchoring both ends of the floor. 3 all-NBA caliber talents on the same roster, backed by a franchise with the resources, the culture, and the hunger to chase titles for years to come. That is not just survival, that is dominance reborn. The next few months will reveal whether this dream is simply speculation or the opening chapter of something historic. One thing is certain: Boston has the assets, the vision, and the desperation of a contender that refuses to step aside. If the Celtics find a way to pull Pascal Siakam into the fold, we may look back at the 2025-2026 season not as a gap year, but as the moment when everything changed forever. The possibility of Pascal Siakam wearing Celtic green is not just a rumor. It feels like the kind of spark that could transform what looks like a lost year into the start of something unforgettable. The question that lingers in every corner of the league is not whether Boston is capable of such a move, but whether they are willing to shake the foundations of the NBA landscape in order to rewrite the story of this season. Celtics predicted to acquire a $188 million superstar with championship DNA is not a headline you can ignore. It strikes like a thunderclap because it represents more than just a player changing jerseys. It symbolizes an entire franchise refusing to surrender its identity as a contender. The narrative is clear. Without Jayson Tatum for the year, the roster is not at its peak. Yet for Boston, mediocrity has never been an option. Jaylen Brown is stepping into the spotlight, ready to shoulder the load. But the question is, how much weight can one star carry without reinforcements? Anthony Simons adds scoring and speed. Derek White brings stability and intelligence, but there's a void in the frontcourt that screams for a leader, someone with the presence to dominate and the experience to guide a team through storms. That is where Pascal Siakam becomes more than just a dream. He becomes a necessity. Look beyond the numbers and accolades, and you see the qualities that align perfectly with Boston's DNA. In 2019, he was not just a role player on Toronto's championship team. He was a co-star alongside Kawhi Leonard, delivering on the biggest stage with confidence that belied his years. Since then, he has become one of the most versatile forwards in the league, averaging over 21 points per game in his prime years and still maintaining a career average of 18 points per game despite starting slowly in his early seasons. That is the mark of consistency and growth. Defensively, Siakam is exactly the type of weapon Boston thrives on. Long, agile, disruptive, able to guard guards and big men alike, he is the embodiment of the switch-heavy system that has defined the Celtics during their rise. Offensively, he does not need to dominate the ball to influence the game. He can punish smaller defenders in the post, stretch defenses with mid-range scoring, and act as a secondary playmaker when Brown or Simons rest. This combination is rare and invaluable. Critics will point to Indiana, reminding everyone that Siakam was a vital piece of their finals run last season. They will say the Pacers cannot afford to let him go, while Tyrese Halliburton recovers from the same devastating Achilles injury that sidelines Tatum. They will argue that moving him now would dismantle a team with championship potential. On the surface, they are right. Yet the NBA has a long history of unexpected decisions, trades that defy logic, and front offices that gamble in pursuit of a brighter future. This is where Boston's leverage becomes fascinating. They hold assets that could tempt Indiana, even if the Pacers hesitate. Simons is young and under team control. Future draft picks can reshape a franchise for years, and Boston has the flexibility to construct an offer that forces a pause in Indiana's war room. The Pacers may not want to move Siakam, but every team has a breaking point. The curiosity lies in how far Boston is willing to push. For Celtics fans, the imagination runs wild. Picture a season where Boston is not just treading water without Tatum, but actively threatening rivals with a lineup built around Brown and Siakam. Picture the playoffs of 2026 when Tatum returns at full strength and joins forces with two playoff-tested stars to form a trio unmatched in versatility, skill, and hunger. That is not just hope, that is a vision of dominance that stretches far into the future. The beauty of this potential move is that it fits both the short term and the long term. In the immediate future, Siakam keeps Boston relevant, dangerous, and capable of surprising anyone. In the longer arc, he becomes part of a deeper rotation of forwards who are playoff-tested, unafraid of big moments, and capable of sustaining contention year after year. It is the kind of structural reinforcement that could carry Boston through this decade with banners in sight. Of course, pulling it off will be difficult, maybe even improbable. But that is what makes the possibility so electrifying. It is not the easy path that excites fans, it is the bold one. If Brad Stevens and the Celtics front office decide to make this move, they would be telling the world that Boston is not waiting for fate, they are seizing it. And this is where you, the fan, become part of the story. Stay with us as we continue to track every whisper, every rumor, every signal that this blockbuster could be real. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the hype bell, because if Pascal Siakam does become a Celtic, you will want to say you were here the moment the story began. The conversation about Boston's future frontcourt has always circled around one name, Al Horford. For years, he has been the steadying force, the brilliant mind who could defend smarter than younger players defended harder, and the glue that kept complex schemes alive. But every era comes with a question: who comes next? The Celtics may have already placed their bet, and the answer could be far more intriguing than many realize. When the summer reshaped the roster and headlines focused on the departures of Kristaps Porzingis, Luke Kornet, and the gradual winding down of Horford's career, the extension of Xavier Tillman quietly slid under the radar. Yet as training camp approaches, that decision feels less like a minor detail and more like a signal of how Boston intends to build the next stage of its frontcourt. Hidden in plain sight is the possibility that Tillman becomes the successor to Al Horford, carrying forward the blueprint of intelligence, switchability, and playoff poise that define Boston's defensive identity. Tillman at his best has never been about flash. He wins possessions by recognizing them before they unfold. He anticipates drives, closes passing lanes, and communicates like a coach on the floor. That is exactly how Horford extended his prime well into his late 30s, compensating for lost athleticism with precision and anticipation. Tillman may not erase shots at the rim with towering blocks, but he shrinks space in ways that frustrate even elite scorers. In a league that values versatility, his ability to guard wings and centers, to switch onto guards without being exposed, and to keep the entire unit connected makes him uniquely valuable. The curiosity lies in whether he can sustain it consistently. Injuries limited his rhythm in previous seasons, and sporadic minutes created a cycle of inconsistency. But moments of clarity did appear, most notably in Game 3 of the 2024 NBA Finals against the Dallas Mavericks, when Tillman delivered crucial stops and even knocked down a momentum-shifting three-pointer. That glimpse reminded everyone of the ceiling Boston once imagined when they traded for him. This season the context is radically different. With Horford no longer able to log heavy minutes, with Porzingis and Kornet gone, the opportunity is wide open. Boston has built layers of options with Chris Boucher's veteran presence, Nemias Queta's size and rebounding, Luka Garza's scoring punch, and rookie Amari Williams as a developmental swing. But each of those players carries limitations. None mirrors the specific blend of intelligence, flexibility, and low-usage efficiency that Horford provided for years. That is the lane Tillman can seize. The question that lingers is not whether he can defend, because that part of his game is already playoff-proven, but whether he can force defenses to respect his shot. 1 year remains on his contract at roughly $2.5 million, a low-cost investment with potentially high value. If his jump shot proves reliable, spacing improves, rotations stabilize, and Boston gains the flexibility to play big without sacrificing flow. That is a rare outcome for a role player, and is why his evaluation window feels so pivotal. Imagine the impact if Tillman does rise into that role. Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum, when healthy together, would be flanked by a frontcourt player who does not demand touches yet elevates the entire scheme. Joe Mazzulla would have the freedom to toggle between lineups, switching from speed to size without breaking the system. Depth would no longer be a concern, but a weapon. And most importantly, the Celtics would transition seamlessly from the Horford era into something sustainable without needing to overpay in free agency or mortgage the future in trades. What makes this so fascinating is that it is not the obvious storyline. Fans are drawn to superstar rumors, to the possibility of Pascal Siakam or other headline names arriving in Boston. Yet the real secret to long-term success may be found in these quieter moves, the recommitment to a player who understands the nuances of defense and has already shown flashes of playoff credibility. If Tillman unlocks his jumper, the narrative changes instantly. Boston has built its identity not only on stars, but on role players who rise to the moment, who understand the system, and amplify the strengths of those around them. Al Horford embodied that better than anyone. Now the torch may be passing. And while questions remain, the fact that the Celtics are even preparing for this transition signals that they refuse to be caught unprepared. The future of the Boston frontcourt may already be here, waiting for the moment to prove that one quiet decision can echo louder than the biggest trade rumor.